Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Dan, and this is Forlorn Hobbies. Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now, today I wanted to kind of reflect on my personal hobby experience for the last couple of months, where I have hit a bit of a wall. Now, this wall isn't necessarily because I haven't been bothered or I've been too busy. It's kind of been a high and low kind of roller coaster of emotions in terms of my hobbying because of a significant change rules wise to one of the main games that I play. So I thought it would be good to kind of, now that that kind of whirlwind ride is kind of over and I'm starting to get back on track, to kind of reflect on just how much addition changes can have to your hobby experience. Now, I don't want this video to kind of be a rambling of, oh, it's the worst thing ever, or even to be overly critical. I want to kind of take a step back outside of the raw kind of feeling that surrounded the release of the latest Horus Heresy edition and the obvious community uproar that it kind of triggered. Because at the end of the day, it's just a game, and I think upon reflection, yes, there are things that I don't like about it, but there are also some good changes and new miniatures, so that is a good thing. So I don't really want to delve into the nitty gritty. I want to kind of explore like the impact that it has had as a generalized overview, and perhaps look at how it contrasts to other edition changes, such as the recent Middle Earth one, or even the still concerning death of Warhammer Fantasy Battles and replaced with Age of Sigmar, and even the reintroduction of the Old World to kind of placate that later on, and also to have a look at the kind of contrast that you see in historical gaming, where the approach, I think, from rules writers is a lot different, and it has a much more relaxed kind of rules push within the community, I feel. Now, one of my first videos on this channel was a video about how I manage burnout, and I think those tools in that video are incredibly relevant still, but I wanted to talk about it from a live kind of perspective. Now, a couple of months ago, I attended a fantastic team event at the Outpost in Sheffield with Tim and a couple of others. And after that event, I could not be more buzzed about cracking on with a new heresy project, or even expanding my Raven Guard that I took, having only painted the army in 5 days, which you could have seen in the video, well, vlog that I did on that recently. Now, I came away from that event, I ordered a load more miniatures ready to expand on that army, and within a week or two, the new Horus Heresy edition was announced, and you had the kind of the leaks and their kind of taster prep that Games Workshop had released for the edition. And the more I read, the more I'd seen, the more it killed my desire to commit my time to any projects relating to that until I had seen the bigger picture. Now, from my own perspective, I only really play massive games of Heresy a couple of times a year with my close gaming group. Now, after attending the event at the Outpost, I was in the mindset that I wanted to change that, perhaps go to more events and more narrative events, because I don't think Heresy should be competitive, and I don't think it works as a competitive setting from the perspective of a primarily historical wargamer. Now, the more I saw of the changes, the more I began to realize, or to kind of think, that this approach to Heresy now was driven to be a competitive war game with the shift towards the 40k scoring. Now, I used to play 40k growing up, but I would not touch it with a barge pole these days, because it's just an alien concept to me as someone that just wants to have fun. I don't like the way that it's scored, and I think the worst change is probably how the missions are now scored, and that it's throughout the game, and the narrative element is kind of lost. There are some silly, unnecessary rules that have been added in just to add a little bit more complexity to it, which I'm not overly against, but at the same time, I can kind of not be too fussed about. And the game mechanics, I think, will play primarily the same, but with a new flavour. So I'm not overly against that. But scoring was massive, and the changes to list building really have put me off the game. Now, upon release of the game, having read the rulebook and the army books, I think the best way to describe this feeling is that Games Workshop have done an absolutely epic fail of a marketing campaign and launch, because a lot of the issues that have come up within the community have been because there hasn't been clarity. Now, the Legacies PDF have massively saved a lot of my kind of thoughts, because prior to that release, I was looking at my 10,000 points worth of Imperial Fists being completely unplayable, whereas now I've only lost a couple of units. So that is one way for them to save their bacon, I suppose. But it was an unnecessary kind of element of fear that was added into the player base, and I think a lot of players voted with their wallets, and Games Workshop, yes, they planned to do a Legacies all along, but I don't think there would have been anywhere near as much in that PDF if there wasn't such an outrage from it. But I don't really want to dwell on the changes, but having that uncertainty in my hobby experience, obviously I had a lot riding on that new edition. I've got 20,000 points of Iron Warriors, That's 10,000 points of Imperial Fists, among others, that I've put countless hours into and huge amounts of finance into over the years to enjoy the game system. I've played Heresy since day one, and I think the general consensus was there were a few issues that needed changing or clarifying, but the game as it was worked perfectly fine and was very enjoyable. Now, yes, we will get used to the changes, and I'm sure looking back in a year's time there won't be any issues, but that uncertainty allowed your kind of mentality and your approach to projects to kind of, oh, should I do this project because I don't know if it's going to be legal? Why should I waste my time if painting this unit if it's not going to be in the book? So that kind of crept in to my mind, and my productivity just ground to a halt. I think I'd got 2 more tactical squads built, and I've painted 2 models in the past 2 months for that project, where I painted the entire army in 5 days beforehand. And it's not because I haven't had the free time, it's just because I've looked at it and gone, what's the point? Now, I've tried to take my own advice. I've tried to mix up my projects, and to an extent, I've got some things built. But I've not really been having that kind of hobby mojo where I can kind of power on and have any real progress to show for it. Now, I am at the end of that kind of tunnel, and I'm starting to be more productive again. I'm currently working on a quick and easy paint scheme for my Prussian project that I have to do as a forfeit, although that isn't necessarily the most fun thing, but I'm hoping next week that will be out as a video and that I will be able to work on the force as a whole in the background to some other projects that I have lined up as well. But just looking at the contrast in the launch for the Heresy edition, which I think was an absolute shambles, I think there is a trend in Games Workshop releases now, specifically, which I don't think focuses on the player base. They just want to sell things. And, in a capitalist society, that is the first and only rule of business. So you can't really blame them for that. And looking at the Lord of the Rings release, where you had factions removed completely, and then you had to wait a good 6 months for half of the remaining non-film stuff to be included in the game. Here's another example of kind of hobby killing kind of feeling from looking at a new edition. And whilst that hasn't affected me as much because I could use my things, I wasn't really losing much from it, just a few characters here or there. List building I wasn't overly happy with to begin with, but now that we have the new book for Middle-earth, a lot of my issues have been removed. The game still plays exactly as it always has, and I've always said the best thing about Middle-earth is the fact that Games Workshop left it alone. So when I heard about the the new edition pending, I did have that same fear, which then again also ground my hobby productivity in that regard. And by and large, though, once I'd seen the rules, I think the release of the rules was handled a lot better. There was a lot of hype about intelligence and stuff being that, but there was always that reassurance that the game would play and feel exactly the same, and it pretty much does. There's a few tweaks, but nothing that you wouldn't expect to have changed. And I think in contrast, there was a lot of hype in the Heresy release about what was going to be different that spooked the community. And, I was spooked. I didn't descend to the keyboard warrior, oh, I'm going to quit this and vote with that and all that kind of rage. But even though I've got so many projects that would be unaffected by this change, when I'd come out of that event, my mind was fixed on heresy projects, and I just couldn't find that shift to change it and paint a historical army or build some terrain, because I wanted to do this. But then obviously I didn't want to do this because it could be a waste of time. And it kind of, I've been thinking over the last few weeks where I've not released anything because I didn't want to let the rage kind of come through online whilst talking about it. And I didn't really have anything else to show. I've got a lot of kind of half in the works projects, as I say, mentioning the Prussians and the War of the Roses. There's another terrain build that I'm working on. But I wanted to allow time for that to settle. I've gone outside of the hobby to kind of revitalize myself. Now, ironically, I found a very good distraction that has now led to a lot of hobby ideas in basically just binging my spare time playing Kingdom Come Deliverance, which is fully lit a fuse under the projects relating to 15th century Bohemia and its turmoils. So keep an eye out for that in the future, because I'm sure it is only a matter of time before that madness descends to the tabletop and into reality as projects. But, the hobby is always going to be filled with challenges to your collections. Yes, it's a continuously evolving cycle. So some things are going to become obsolete, such as, 8th edition fantasy battles. Now, I was one of those that continued to play 8th edition all the way up, I mean, even to this day, where I pretend that Age of Sigmar just doesn't exist, because it was just such a terrible, terrible game to be released after fantasy. Now, I'm sure it's come on leaps and bounds and is probably a very good game today. But as a consumer, my response to how they handled that launch and the cancelling of one of the main games that I played at the time was to want nothing to do with it, and I still hold that view today. Now, that said, when editions change to the point where you go, enough is enough, I don't have any interest in playing that, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'll step away from the ranges, because I'm a hobbyist first and foremost. I think gaming is a secondary part of my kind of hobby enjoyment, and I don't need it to feel fulfilled. So there are projects that I will work on, like the recent release of the Deathcore of Krieg. Now, I've wanted to do a Krieg army for a very long time, but they hadn't released the range. So with the release of that, I've picked up some boxes to work on in the background from purely hobby perspective. And that's great as well. I could play 40k if I wanted to, but I have no desire to play it as it stands. Now, my 10-year-old is obsessed with Space Marines and is always going, oh, I want to play 40k. And I'm like, no, it's rubbish. We're not playing 40k. And then I've been carefully nurturing him to play Heresy. And for the last couple of months, I've been like, no, we're not playing Heresy because I don't want to get you hyped into this if I make the decision to no longer play Heresy. And I didn't want to have that tie. So we've been carefully cultivating him towards Middle-earth. And he's started to come to the club with us, well, with me and Tim to play. And his dice rolling has cost me a couple of strategic advantages and allowed Tim to win some games. You'll have also seen maybe on his channel where they've done naval games where Tim has been teaching him how to play the Napoleonic Black Seas game, which he had great enjoyment because he is a massive fan of sinking ships, especially the Titanic, which for a 10-year-old is very concerning. But I digress. Now, looking in contrast to the historical gaming perspective, I feel that the rules are a lot more relaxed, and I think it's a complete contrast, really, where in like kind of Games Workshop's perspective, the rules exist and the miniatures exist to support the rules, and the rules are changed and adapted and updated frequently, which is basically the cash cow mechanism where you have the meta chasers and stuff like that. There's a constant slew of new miniatures, which is great for the industry and the promotion of that, etc. But when you look at historical gaming, the rules are there to support the miniatures, I think. Now, most historical gamers play to recreate historical armies, to battle historical events using Orbats, where the miniatures are the prime function, where the rules are there basically just as a way to get something more out of your collection. And it's not the primary focus. I think there have been very few edition changes. Black Powder is on its second edition in God knows how many years, but the change from that edition, from the first one, is just a few clarity kind of issues. There's a little tweak here and there with just bringing together the supplement rules and stuff like that. And it gives a very good kind of safety net, I think, for the community, is that it doesn't matter if you play Black Powder, Valor and Fortitude, General D'Armée, whatever it is, Soldiers of Napoleon, or even Hail Caesar, Ancients. There's a huge variety. You will find a rule set that suits your collection, suits your needs. But there's also a good deal of diversity, but in the rules that allow the multifunction of your collection. So you can use the same miniatures for Valor and Fortitude as you would Black Powder. You would use them in Napoleon. You know, the base the same. It's very loose in terms of it's just frontages. It's not X amount of regiments and stuff like that. And I think that gives them much more player control in terms of what they want to do, flexibility, and you get a lot more out of your collection and time investment. And I think primarily being a historical gamer, that kind of laid back or everything suits kind of approach has made it harder in the recent changes, because I only play 2 or 3 games now by Games Workshop, which is Fantasy, Heresy, Middle Earth. That when those changes occur and they set off those alarm bells, it's very easy to just be like, no, I'm not wasting my time, rather than giving it a fair chance. Now, as I've discussed, the impact on my hobby has been quite negative of late. And I will probably take a little bit of a shift back towards focusing on historicals and Middle Earth than I would from Heresy, which is, it's great to have flexibility. That helps kind of clear the air. And hopefully I will be back doing regular videos for various projects. I'm hoping that if I can't manage it weekly, that they will at least be every fortnight. And we'll be back to varying between terrain, painting, and kind of showcases, with the odd kind of discussion video in there as well. Now, if there is anything in particular that you would like to see, please leave a comment, and I will see what I can do. I'm always looking for new ideas, and even just fresh mini projects, just to kind of cleanse the palette, so to speak. I think I want to do a few smaller projects just so I can get that satisfaction of completion, to kind of kickstart my kind of more grueling challenges going forward. Now, I think that will be it for today. So I hope that this has given you a bit of an eyesight to kind of that hobby challenges and issues can occur from time to time, and that ultimately it is okay to just say, right, I'm going to have a break, I'm going to focus on something else, and I'm going to come back with a fresh perspective and just let that kind of heightened emotion settle before it kind of just ruins the hobby for you. So, with that, I will hope to catch you in the next one.
Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time, enjoy your hobby.